my higher self said, Verlina, you're working too small and you're being too private. You need to work larger and you need to share. And so I think from that experience taught me that often I was being too small, to be honest, both in size, but in terms also of my ambition, because I feared putting myself out there. I felt like I was making myself vulnerable and I didn't want to be judged. And I cared way too much what others thought.
Welcome to the Zami Nobla National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging podcast. We are your sound source for Black lesbian herstory. I'm your host, Angela Denise Davis. Our interview today is with artist Verlina L. Johnson. This is the last interview from our Cocktails, Tea, and Art, our virtual art show, which we hosted in August of 2020. Verlina offers us a wonderful survey of her artistic landscape as she talks to us about how she came to be the artist she is today.
So my name is Verlina Lisa Johnson, and I'm 50 years old. And I was actually named after my grandmother. My father's mother, her name was Verlina Johnson. So I feel very honored to carry her name. In terms of how I show up in the world, I show up in the world with great curiosity. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, and raised in Wisconsin until the age of 18. And, really feel like I've come to a lot of what I would call forks in the road, or, just things being presented to me and then me making decisions and recognizing that the decisions I made were literally life-changing. I remember being in high school, and I would say about 17, a art teacher, Mr. Hawk was his name, in Beloit, Wisconsin, asked to borrow one of my pastel drawings. And it was a pastel I'd done of Janet Jackson. And he, without me knowing it, entered the drawing in an art competition. Mm-hmm. And then I completely forgot he had it. And then weeks later, he told me that it had won first place in this art competition. And I remember being quite surprised by that and taken aback. But I think it was at that point that I felt as though I was beginning to get recognized for what for me was my passion. And I often think that my art is something that I've had to do, but that it helped me to survive and to heal childhood trauma. And I didn't necessarily think of that, say, in my early 20s per se, but as I began healing and, going to therapy and really just delving into my spirituality, I saw more and more how integral my artwork and creating art was to my self-preservation and to my healing. And when I was in high school, also, Dr. Elsie, who was an African-American principal at my high school, asked me, so Verlina, what are your plans after high school? And I said, I don't know. Up until about a year ago, I was in junior ROTC, and I thought I might go into the Marine Corps, not knowing what else to do. But then I learned that the military was very homophobic, and I came out when I was 17. And so I told the teacher, the instructor, I said, I have to drop out of junior RTC. I can't support a homophobic organization. And I did this at 17. And I remember him just looking at me. He seemed rather in shock that I would not only drop out of junior RTC because I was in the color guard and really enjoyed actually dressing up and all of that kind of thing. But he was like, what could he say? And at that point, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but it was that question that Dr. Elsie asked. And he said, have you ever considered college? And I said, no. And chose to take the ATC test, got into a university, and I found myself in books. For me, similar to my art, I found books to be a godsend, really, or a goddess-send. So when I was 19, 20, and I was at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a known author asked to meet with a Black lesbian group in town, asked the organizers of an event at the university, was there a Black lesbian organization? And there was one called Bliss, Black Lesbians in Search of Self. And this was Audre Lorde. So Audre Lorde literally asked to meet with us. And there were a group of about 15 of us or something like that in someone's home, and we had a potluck. And so one of the earlier drawings that I have to say I'm quite proud of is a drawing called Sister Outsider, and I believe it was done in 1990, and one that I'll share on the 22nd. And it's a picture of Audre Lorde. It's in graphite, and it's her image is in a mirror, the frame of a mirror, and you can see my head from behind. And I had a high top fade because that was the hairstyle back then. And I was looking into the mirror and seeing Audrey's face reflecting back. And so for me, even then, at that point, very early on, I saw my connection to like a recent past, and saw myself in the context, I think, of this foremother, this incredibly brilliant woman who wrote this book, that I saw myself in her book in a way that I had never seen myself in any other situation, not on television, not on books, not in my community. Certainly people were not out back in the 80s in the Midwest, and certainly not Black people in this way. So, and I continue to produce work and create work. And there's a series that I've worked on that gives honor to the ancestors. It's a LGBT African-American historical figures in different genres and different areas and disciplines, but there are about 10 or 12 of them, and I think I've painted about 9. Octavia Butler is being one of them, and blues musicians and different. Lorraine Hansberry, our playwright, and things like that. Edmonia Lewis, who's a sculptor, Native American, African-American sculptor in the 19th century. So that's part of my work. And I say that having said, I was named after my grandmother. So I've always enjoyed history and the sense of where we come from, because sometimes I think we struggle with where we're at. And then to think about what so many of us have endured, and not only endured it, but overcome and made some of the most beautiful, amazing things, built some of the most incredible relationships with others, despite some of the things that we've had to manage.
You talked about meeting Audre Lorde in college and having her come to your campus. That must have been a pretty amazing experience.
To be perfectly honest, I was 20, and it was a very long time ago. I remember there being very few people, and I remember it, as I said, being in a house, and it was a potluck style, so people brought food. I think even at that time, I didn't quite recognize the magnitude of what I was experiencing as a 20-year-old, but I did know her book, and so that I knew. And I have a photograph. Somebody had the foresight to take pictures, and I was able to get a picture of she and I standing side by side. So I have that. I think for me, and I continue to, learn about her and read her poetry and read some of her, like many of her essays and things like that. So I feel after having met her, I learned even a great deal more about her. And I feel so often many of us make ourselves accessible to other people. When I met Angela Davis, the other Angela Davis, it was a very similar experience. I did a painting of her, and the organizers of that event, again at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, connected me like a 20-year-old artist who done a painting of Angela Davis with Angela Davis, and she agreed to meet with me. And so I have a picture of she and I together as well. And I spent probably a few minutes, and she, was probably just like, "Oh, that's very sweet. Thank you so much." I can't imagine what she must have been thinking at the time, or where that painting is or isn't. It really doesn't matter. But the fact that she agreed to do that was just very meaningful. So,
well, I think it's that aspect of a lineage that to me is so important, and being able to connect with people and to see how our work is influenced in so many different ways by all these connections we have with people. And when we're younger, I think to have that clarity of particularly you with art is so important, because I think it adds to the possibility of our lives being able to live out that purpose.
Could you imagine if people like Audre Lorde said, "No, I'm just going to write for myself"?
Yes.
I think I'll just keep volumes of essays and poems and keep them in books, and and didn't share them with the world. How not only our literary landscape, but how our lives would be different. Because I think when you talk about influence, I think of words like inspiration. about providing models of people who said yes. And the thing with, and I love Frida Kahlo, she's one of my favorite visual artists. And one of the reasons I feel even as a young woman, she resonated with me is that, again, there was, this train accident or bus accident rather, that she had been in as a child, and all of this, immense pain that she felt and isolation and all of these other things. And despite all of that, she allowed herself to be vulnerable and exposed. And clearly she constructed parts of herself, as we all do, but there was a level, I feel, of intimacy between herself and I, the viewer of her work. Like there's a part of us, I think, as spectators or viewers or an audience who get to experience someone like an Audre Lorde through her books. And whether we've personally met her or not, to me, she was a model of what it might look like for me to love other women and to be an out lesbian who did not feel shame despite what every other person was saying to me in my life, and who was powerful and still vulnerable, because I think that humanness is what made her extraordinary in many respects. She is definitely a heroine. She was like our superhero. Well, at least I can speak for myself. That is what she has meant to me. And I, painted her several times, but and there have been others as well. And so she is symbolic. My mother, was a white heterosexual woman who married my father and they were, got together back in the late 60s. She could not have provided that modeling for me. She could teach me how to be a feminist, which she did, and very free thinking, which I am. And she taught me a great many things, but she could not have modeled for me how to be a Black lesbian in the world. And not just a Black lesbian, but she, a creative person who followed her bliss and her life's purpose. And I think that for me is the other part of that, is that I think artists generally, the way we perceive and how we relate to our work is very unique to what it is that we do. I feel like I was given a desire. It was planted deep inside of me, this notion that I had to create. For me, it's not a choice. I'm incredibly unhappy when I'm not creating. I lose track of time when I'm painting, because for me it is a meditation. And I ground myself through my work. And that's why I say that it literally, and I think literally, not even metaphorically, it literally has saved me.
Let's talk about what it was like growing up in the Midwest as a part of an interracial family and having clarity about who you were as a lesbian. All of that is very intersectional and has a very profound impact on the way in which one could move in the world.
Yeah. I was that person who had friends in all different types of groups. Beloit is about a town of 35,000, so it's quite small. It's predominantly white, but there were about maybe 9% African Americans, and it was very segregated back in the 80s. And prior to that time, I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, which is far more liberal, and it has the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So my mother was a hippie in the 60s. She participated with SNCC, Students Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, actually, in protests and things in the late 60s. And my father was born in 10 years prior in Mississippi. So literally, in many ways, I think is of a different generation and very different culturally. And so what did they have in common, was the thing. But the thing is that I think my father grounded my mother in many respects and provided her some structure, because my mother, though an earth sign, she's also a Taurus, was a little bit out there in terms of like her thinking. And there was a wild side to my mother, and my father was a very grounding force. And so at any rate, I say all of that to say that by the time I was 17 and thinking about women and fantasizing about this girl or that girl in high school, and I recognized that I was a lesbian, already my mother had several friends that I had been introduced to as children. Ann B., who was a DJ at Universal Soul Explosion, who was an out lesbian, and this woman named Sally, somebody who was from her work. And I knew of them, and my mother had a Joan Armatrading album, as I was growing up. And so there were certain cultural things and friendships that she had. And so there was not a stigma as far as she's concerned. And so when I, at 17, planned to come out to her behind my high school next to the water, it was this huge thing and I could barely breathe. And I told her, I said, Mommy, I just want to tell you something important. And it became a longer and longer intro. And she just looked at me impatient. Was like, what? And I said, I'm a lesbian. And she said, yeah, I know. I was like, what? And I literally looked at her. I said to her, what? That's it? That's your response? Because I was really anticipating something far different than that. Mm-hmm. She said, yeah, I've known since you were little. I was like, okay. And then I didn't tell my father, but she did. And so I think even though and she took me to my first lesbian bar when I was like 18, she found a lesbian and LGBT youth group in a nearby town for me and took me there and then, would carry me to the bus so that I could take the bus up every Saturday or whatever. So I did have that support network. And to me, the difference between my experience and the experience of one of my friends in high school who was a male and who liked dressing in my shoes and some of my dresses, etc. But he would do that at my house, and he felt safe there, but, out and about, he did not at all. And so it was a very different place. And I recognized like how fortunate truly that I was to have the parents that I had. And my father too, he's always, accepted me. He doesn't have the same relationship to the culture or understanding. It doesn't matter to him. What matters is I'm his daughter and he loves me tremendously. He's never brought it up in a negative way. And when I've brought, partners home or what have you, he's treated them just like anyone else, honestly. And so for that, I've been blessed.
Are your parents still alive?
My mother had passed away. She transitioned 4 years ago. Actually, she had cancer, lung cancer, and my father's still alive, and he'll be 85 at the end of this month, actually. So I'm very fortunate. My son and I, who is 11, went and spent some time with him. So he too has been very influential to me, in part because, he is an incredible storyteller. Like verbal storyteller. He talked about Brer Rabbit before I went to university and found out the significance of that. And he is a blues musician, self-taught, but he knows some of the great blues musicians, has spent time with them in Louisiana in particular. And so I grew up in a house full of guitars and harmonicas and daddy singing. And so I think for me, I am not a musician, though I love playing drums. I've carved a djembe, and I love instruments and kind of collect them a little bit. That is to me not my gift. I do it for enjoyment, but for him, I have found tremendous pleasure in hearing the blues and have such an appreciation of the music and the contributors to the blues. But then I also saw, again, another disparity because of how we treat our blues musicians relative to other musicians who are playing in other genres or other, types of music. The blues in many respects, I think, are all but forgotten. Mm-hmm. Many of the young people don't even know the blues greats, to think about Howlin' Wolf and Etta James and all of these extraordinary musicians and vocalists, And so, my father's story, and I thought of at some point producing a book, and I've started writing a manuscript, and I interview him, and I've interviewed him and my mother. Since I went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, I took a couple of video classes and have done some video editing, but I have taken my video camera to his blues sets and recorded him. I've recorded him sitting on his chair, talking about his life. And I'll never forget, and, just quickly, but he asked me once why I was doing that. And he was really suspicious, like, Verlena, like, why are you asking me all these questions? And I said, well, Daddy, because I'm interested in this time period of your growing up, and I want to know about your childhood and your being a young man. And you could tell for him, it was this idea that you don't talk about Charlie. You don't talk about, the man. You don't talk about these experiences and things of that nature. And, there's a certain level of not wanting to share, particularly in such a potentially public place, something that is to be kept secret and what have you. And because it was me, I feel fortunate because even despite his discomfort and his questioning my motives, he spoke about those things anyway. So at some point, I would love to put that together. And I've done some paintings of him, a few paintings, but I would love to do it like a children's book about the blues and weave together fiction and biographical information.
I've seen the Smokestack Lightning, the portraiture you did of your dad.
Yes.
Have you done one of your mom as well?
I have done several pieces of my mother. After my mother transitioned, actually, I did a piece of her, a large watercolor painting. And there are like two sort of, they appear, although I didn't try to because, but they appear as though they're wings of a bird or of an angel. And she has her hands in a particular gesture, which for me, it's a very, and this is true for me in terms of like my work. I, deal with a lot of emotions, and there are oftentimes things that I'm working through on a subconscious level. And so again, it was wanting to give honor or homage to her and my connection to her as well. But there was this notion of her living on and on and on and on. I do not believe that when our souls leave our bodies, which I believe are just the vessel, that there's an ending to anything. I think all is energy and all is eternal, including our souls. And so for me, she just changed her form. And part of that, the painting was my interpretation of that. And sort of, there are spirals involved and all of these other things. But, in terms of the symbolism that I use in my work, which, if you go to my website, verlenajohnson.com, I believe, or when I show my work on the 22nd, what people will notice is that there are certain symbols that will be seen throughout. Not all of my pieces, for example, have halos, but I've been doing them since, I don't know, for like the last 20, 25 years in many of my pieces. And there's a piece I did called I Am. And I am as a statement is for me and for many a very, very powerful affirmation, one of the most powerful two words connected together. But anything following those two words are sort of what you are claiming or proclaiming and putting out in the universe, so to speak. So this piece is entitled I Am, but I often say I am love, I am prosperous, I am compassionate, I am. And so focus on that. So for me also, besides the process of painting being a meditation, for me, my paintings are affirmations. And so a lot of times I think even when I did not feel secure within myself, when I felt unsure, when I felt unimportant and not enough, which I've felt much of my life, those things, unfortunately. It's very nearly impossible, I would imagine, for many of us to get through life, particularly our earlier parts of our lives, feeling enough and feeling worthy of love and things of that nature. So I, like many, have struggled with that. But I think even before I understood and knew that thoroughly within myself, I painted myself as being divine. And so, there are early paintings of myself with the halo, with like the I Am piece. And I just repeated that particular kind of painting. And for me, I knew and understand that all that exists is divine, and all of us, each and every one of us, is important and is divine. So a lot of times I will do that. And with my series of African-American LGBT historical figures, they all have halos. And so I chose to do them all in gray. So I wanted to bring in that historical figure, even though many of them certainly could be in color photographs and have been depicted like that. But I've, done different things with their halos, which is like the circle, which is like the sun, which is like life. And so between, I think, halos and also spirals appear a lot. Spirals symbolize infinity, and, the only constant is change, for example, and things of that nature. It's very important. And so the site of the paintings then, sort of for me, that's the way I tell my stories. My father chooses words and music and tells stories that way. And so for me, I'm telling stories of what has been, what is at present moment, and what I wish to be in the future. So in that way, I love to see my pieces as something that I can affirm. So there's a piece that the most recent piece that I did is this piece, and it's called, it's I Am Truth. I am trusting. And the reason being is because I was thinking about what it is to trust. And often, we think about needing to trust other people. And what I've been realizing even at this state of this age that I am at 50 is that really I've had to learn to trust myself, learn to trust my own instincts, my own intuitions, my own thoughts and ideas about things, and to trust the universe, to have a belief that universe has me, that universe is wanting and desiring the most beautiful experiences and unfoldment. And so I feel like when I have surrendered, the piece prior to this was not about surrendering, which I've done work on that, but about letting go, because I have had to or wanted to control things and have had issues with letting go and surrendering to people, to things, to situations and circumstances and so forth. And so for me, this was literally, and I put a monarch butterfly in it because butterflies speak of transformation. I put a lotus at the fourth chakra, the heart chakra, because there's a blossoming there. And then lotuses as well have, meaning as it relates to something coming from the mud and the murk, and something which can be so beautiful. And this is the raising of a consciousness and an awareness. So, and when I paint, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention, I often paint with crystals always. So I have a smoky crystal and a clear crystal, and I smudge with sage, for example. And so I'm setting a context, and I have my table, and I bring my crystals, and these are my two most powerful crystals. They're crystals actually that I've had for a while, and I took to my mother's with me and put on her ledge of the window where she was lying before she transitioned. And as she was making her transition, I placed them in her hands. And so she held them. And I wanted to imbue the crystals. I believe objects contain energies, all objects, all things, living and seemingly innate objects. And so I did that, and I bring them to my table, and I have my paints and ideas. And that particular painting, I used a selfie that I had taken, a self-portrait, and then just began, to painting it. And then the butterflies coming from the sixth or seventh chakra, because to me, transformation is hugely important, and ideas of healing ourselves. And so I set a tone, and I'm connected, and I'm thinking of the prana, the life force coming through my seventh, my sixth chakra. And to me, that is an inspiration. I'm a channel. And as I'm painting and I'm working and I'm breathing and I'm being, like I experience the moment. I'm not worried about yesterday. I'm not thinking about what I need to get at the grocery store in an hour or any of those things, but literally I lose myself, senses of time, and I'm in the moment, and I'm infusing energy or prana into my work. And I took a few Reiki courses. I'm a level 2, and I really began to think about this energy that emanates from not only our bodies, but we have, these different chakras, but we have these different layers of energy that throughout these auras that we just are emanating. And so for me to be very intentional with how I direct that and how I'm being in the world. And for me then, in that way, my art becomes a vehicle or a tool in which I can embed that energy and those symbols to create that meaning on an energetic field level, but also in terms of a visual level. So that I've been doing for about the last 2 or so years, but that is something I continue to explore and something that really excites me about my work.
As you look at the body of your work over the years, what has changed? What have you seen coming through that? I love this conversation about learning to trust yourself at 50. How has your work exemplified the growth that you've experienced as an artist and as a woman?
I think about that because, as I said, I have my work around me. And so as I'm experiencing my work, I think about those types of things. I tend to be a very introspective, reflective kind of person. And so, and my artwork is like I'm in conversation with aspects of myself, of levels of consciousness. So I guess as a means to respond to that, I'll say, I filled a small book, a journal with paintings, which I've done several versions of And I would take gel pens and markers and draw self-portraits. I did a couple portraits of my son, of a spiritual teacher, of Jimi Hendrix, actually, of different things and with words and texts. I did this about 5 years ago. And I remember sitting with this small book with this really nice, interesting textured paper that I had filled literally from front to back with all of these images. And I was very proud, actually, of what I had done. And then I proceeded to spill tea on this book. And the tea saturated many of the pages and probably, quote, ruined or bled about half of it, right? And I remember immediately for about 20 seconds feeling really bad, remorseful, and just really upset that I had done that. And then a voice, almost, my higher self said, Verlina, you're working too small and you're being too private. You need to work larger and you need to share. I get it that this has been personal for you. I get it that, this is like this is your room. Everyone should have a room of one's own sort of thing. But that is not what you're to do. And so I literally said, okay, yes, fine, sure. And so I think from that experience taught me that often I was being too small, to be honest, both in size, but in terms also of my ambition, because I feared putting myself out there. I felt like I was making myself vulnerable and I didn't want to be judged. And I cared way too much what others thought. So there have always been these paradoxes where on one hand, I came out at 17 in high school and people knew that I was queer. I tried to start an organization at my high school, speaking to my principal and what have you. And so I felt this conflict of like wanting to be an activist and also wanting to self-preserve and being very sensitive and so forth. So at any rate, because of that experience and because, I have understood my work as I have, and through a lot of self-work, honestly, I've been able to heal aspects of myself and feel far more confident sort of in the who I am, the what I am, the how I've been, the what I've experienced and things of that nature. I feel like my work has become more beautiful. By no stretch of the imagination do I think art has to be beautiful to be art. In fact, many of the most powerful and interesting work is not. But for me, the change that I saw is in 2001, when I was participating, for example, in police brutality demonstrations, and I was making marionettes at that time and puppets and stuff. I had carved a 3.5-foot puppet of Mumia Abu-Jamal, who was a journalist you probably know on the East Coast, who was wrongly convicted of murdering a cop years ago, I think like in the early 90s. And I'd been at these police demonstrations and I would make these signs, these graphic signs, and I would demonstrate and I would shout and I would march, and sometimes I would use my drums or whatever. And I carved this Mumia marionette, and it was all black, painted him all black, and then used some of my locks that I had from years previous that I had in a bag and fixed them to his head. And people on the train were like, oh my gosh, what is that? Who is that? They were asking all these questions, but I literally noticed how they engaged this object, this piece of art. And if I were carrying a demonstration sign, they wouldn't have said anything, many of them. But I felt like they were pulled into that object in a particular way. And I say all of this to say it showed me, again, the power of art and how people connect and relate to it oftentimes. Even when they don't say anything, they're observing, they're looking, they're experiencing it. And I say, I did a warrior woman series of abstract figurative dolls with beads, and they were carved. There was mahogany and walnut and cherry wood. Cherry wood is my favorite to carve. And these figures and whatnot. And so they were warrior women, but they were spiritual. There was a physicality to them in this suggestion of, fighting, but I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in that. But there was a spiritual, I think, not war, battle, if you will. I don't like things of war, but there was a struggle, if you will, on a spiritual level. So my art shifted from where I would be doing political work, overtly political work, to where my work took on almost an exclusively spiritual dimension. And that's what I chose to depict, because I believe in the law of attraction. And what we affirm, we create more of. I think, people have said, I will never go to an anti-war demonstration or protest, but if you have one that celebrates peace, I'm there. So I think it's important that people respond to things in the world in the way that they're called to. So for people who, create very overt, very political work, I think that's fabulous. And I love that work too. But my personal calling is not to do that. Mine is to, talk about love, the power of love, I would say fundamentally is at the core of all of my work. And part of the reason I understand now that I did so many self-portraits was because I truly felt I needed to learn to love myself first. I think self-love and, caring for oneself and honoring oneself and accepting unconditionally oneself is a huge undertaking. I think many of us leave this plane and still have not learned to do that. So for years, that's what I've been doing.
I'm so excited about the virtual art show we're having on August 22nd, 2020, because I think it gives folks a chance to experience art, in particular the art of Black lesbians, in a time in which it's so important that we continue to center our lives and to share our work. So I just can't wait to see the pieces that you're going to celebrate with us, not just share, but to celebrate your work and your purpose. This is going to be quite exceptional. We are living in the midst of a global pandemic, and things have changed so drastically for us. How has your life, your family life, your work life changed in the midst of all of this? And how are you dealing with trying to continue to create this healing space, this productive, creative space in your life right now?
For me, I think that art has always been a constant, as I mentioned before. So my practice is such that, by and large, it's always available to me. And I think like any practice, meditation or prayer or any sort of ritual, and I'm very much into rituals, that they anchor me. So I mentioned in our meeting that when George Floyd had been murdered and news of his murder and the details of it and, people's response to it were coming out. I don't follow the news particularly, and mostly because I find it mostly very negative and very depressing, to be perfectly honest. So I hear little bits, but got enough. And I felt such sadness and I felt so overwhelmed, so much, anger also, but mostly just sad that we were in this period, this time, and yet we were so vulnerable, and that there were those people who felt our lives were meaningless, our life, our existence, really. Again, nothing new. But I think what I did immediately after maybe about a day of just, immense feeling is I just sat down at my table and started a painting. And for me, unlike, say, in early 2000s when I was doing this activist work or other periods of my life where I've done activist work, I have a young son who's 11. And this brown boy, this son of mine, this individual who I cherish beyond all others, really, I felt bad for his potential experiences in the world and how this would impact and affect him. And he and I have since talked about it. But rather than focus on the things that I teach him about, how to navigate in the world to the extent that I can, he'll just unfortunately have to experience some of it because I can't protect him. And all of us, I think, want to protect our children, but, things are as they are. But I sat down and did this painting, and it was a beautiful painting, and it was mystical painting, and it was colorful. And there was, to me, a certain level of joy because despite what was going on and, in the world, to me, that is outside of me. That does not define who I am. That is not, who I'm going to choose to be. In a sense, and I'm not coming from a place of being naive. There are some who say, well, you shouldn't bury your head in the sand. And I'm like, well, I'm going to experience joy and happiness and feeling whole and complete. Nobody can take that from me. I can be angry for 24 hours or whatever period of time I personally need, but I know at my fingertips or within my soul, within my consciousness, I always have access to things like joy and happiness. And so I have learned in my life to shift my attention and my energy from things which for me before would have consumed me for months and years. I mean, there were years in which I've experienced, I would say, some level of depression, And so I think that to liberate oneself from that and to take dominion over my emotions and my psyche, there's nothing more powerful. I think, going back to Audre Lorde, she has, quotes about self-preservation and taking care of self-care and, Bell Hooks similarly talks about love and all of these self-care and all of these types of things, because I think those folks, we recognize the importance of that. That's why I think that the organization you all have like a meditation group and people have been doing that. And so what I've noticed with the pandemic is that people have been getting all of their tools out of their toolbox and saying, how is it that I can stay grounded and sane and connected and, not implode or explode or dissolve, or whatever? How can I take care of myself? And what's been unique about this is, unlike any other time and period in my memory or anyone else's, I would imagine, is that people are sharing via the internet and Facebook and Zoom and Instagram and all of these other social media platforms, ways that they've been caring for themselves. And they've been connecting with people and having house parties and, poetry readings and the arts in particular. Again, cannot imagine a world without the arts. Simply cannot, not as an individual and certainly not in terms of a community or extended communities. And so those are the changes that I'm seeing. Is that people are willing to share of themselves and to share with one another in a way that I don't feel it happened. Some of us, yes, we absolutely did. We're on different circuits and, we've published our work and we've shared, but I'm talking about just masses more people sharing their gardening. Like, when have you heard people talking about their love of plants and, their love of animals, their love of, landscapes and taking sunsets and, their love of their grandchildren or their nieces and their nephews? I just feel like people really are shifting focus and really trying to think about the things that give their life meaning.
For the final question, is there anything we left out? Is there any piece of information that you think is important for our audience to know about you, about your process, about how you're living in the world right now that would be helpful to them?
I think the thing that's coming to my heart is simply, just that I am daily reminding myself of the power of I am, but also the power of saying yes. I have a gratitude practice when I first wake in the morning, and I'm incredibly grateful for so much. But when I operate and function in that way and then say yes, in essence, I'm saying yes to all the good, to all of the blessings, and I know that not only do I have an intimate relationship with God Creator, that I am, that we are all, each and every one of us, so powerful in terms of what we can manifest and create. That is what I remind myself. And that to me is so important. And it just so happens I use art as a vehicle or as an expression of that. But I think in each and every one of my interactions in this conversation that we're having, we are manifesting and creating together.
Verlena Lisa Johnson, I am so excited that you said yes to this interview. Thank you for being part of our Black Lesbian Herstory.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be a part.
As I was editing this conversation with Verlena, there were several points along the way where I just stopped and said, So today I'd focus on the gift of creativity and what it means to have space and share space for our artistic visions. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I hope you have such a space. Thank you again, Verlena, for that conversation. If you have enjoyed the podcast, then support it. Let us know how much you love what we're doing by leaving a comment wherever you listen to the podcast. We so appreciate having you in our listening audience. As always, take care and have a sweet one.